Welcome to the Serve Campus podcast, a resource for campus ministry workers and volunteers across Canada, providing inspiration, education, and coaching for people leading ministries on post-secondary campuses. Our goal is to encourage and resource you in your vital work on universities, colleges, institutes, wherever you are. Grab a cup of coffee. We're interviewing Robb Powell today. It's going to be exciting and fun. So grab a coffee, relax, enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. My name is John Ingalls, and I hope that our time together helps you think creatively about serving and enriching your campus ministry. Well, we're really excited today about talking about history, and for history buffs, this is our zone. But it's really important that as we talk about history, we understand our roots, and it helps us bring clarity to the future. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking about the history of Serve Campus Network, and our guest today, as Jordan already mentioned, is Robb Powell, hailing from Hamilton, Ontario. So you were the first national coordinator for Serve. Correct me if I'm wrong, but 2009 to 2017. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And during that time, as the first national coordinator, there was a lot of pioneering work, obviously, a lot of groundbreaking stuff. And of course, Robb has been involved so much in carving out campus ministry across the nation. And we are where we are today, Robb, because of a lot of the work that you have done. And so I just want to say a big thank you from all of us. We appreciate you and love you. And, Robb has a wealth of wisdom that we all enjoy whenever he shares with us. So today I think is going to be enlightening. And we'll get to that in a moment. But, there are a lot of great quotes about history, but this is one from President Theodore Roosevelt. He said, "The more you know about the past, the better prepared you are for the future." And I think that's really true. It really helps us to innovate and to plan better for the future when we understand our roots and our history. So let's begin today by taking out our pickaxes and shovels and get into some archaeology, which dates back to the time when we were barely toddlers. In 1961, I don't know if you know this, Robb, but I've unearthed a little bit more history from Newfoundland, and I just want to share, and then we'll let you get into it. So in 1961, our Pentecostal assemblies, the Pentecostal assemblies in Newfoundland at Memorial University, St. John's, there were two pastors, Roy King and Jeffrey Shaw, who researched the assemblies of Chi Alpha Campus Ministries back then and gained a vision together to disciple students. And so it was at that time, they gathered about 20 students to form a campus club, and it started in November of 1961. So this past November was the 60th anniversary for the beginnings of campus ministry out on the Rock, out on Newfoundland. And so Roy was the first Pentecostal chaplain at Memorial University from 1960 to 1967. So we're very grateful for Roy, Jeffrey, and students that had that vision at the time, having no idea where it would go. And the fun thing is that the ministry at Memorial University continues to this day under the leadership of Steve Grimes, who also serves on our national Serve Campus Guiding Group. And so those are some fun facts that I want our listeners to know and celebrate as we begin now just to chat with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Jordan at this point.
That's pretty cool. It's pretty awesome. You never know where things are going to go, eh? So, or how they're going to unfold. So just Robb, tell us a bit about yourself. What motivated you to get into campus ministry? And yeah, just tell us a bit about that today.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a mainline denomination, and one which really reinforced a strong agnosticism that I had, up until the middle of the university. I had a quest for spirituality, but the denomination that I was a part of was called liberal. It's sort of progressive 1.0. And so it had adapted itself to modernism. But then what happened is that my family was impacted by the charismatic renewal. And there's a whole story behind that. But in my fourth year, I found that I was had embraced strongly Pentecostal charismatic spirituality. As part of my life, I had committed my life to Christ, filled with the Spirit, didn't know what to do. I went to an university group. They didn't know what to do with me. They loved me a lot. And I also had a thirsty intellect. So I just inhaled apologetics, Bible, theology, but I was also that charismatic guy, that guy that nobody quite knew what to do with. And part of me was thinking at the time, so this would be in the mid-'70s. It would be around 1977, 78. I'm asking myself what question, why can't I have it all? Like, why can't we have the whole package? Why does it need to be compartmentalized? And so I'm going to move a little bit forward. I find myself at Regent College at UBC, and I am just graduated with a degree in range and wildlife management. I had a science background, again, a thirsty intellect. And again, at Regent, I was that guy. In other words, I loved the life of the mind, the intellect, theology, apologetics, but I also knew the power of God. And it wasn't just experiential, because it was visual. It was external to me. I could see God move, work, act. He had healed my sister-in-law dramatically. So I wasn't going to let that go. So here we are in the summer of 1980. It's my first summer in Vancouver. I'm staying over. I'm part of a church plant in downtown Vancouver. And I was told that the place that I was staying, that there would be another roommate that would be joining us probably sometime in June, and his name was Reed Johnson. And Reed had just been commissioned by the Chi Alpha in Bellingham. It was called University Christian Fellowship. He'd gone through their internship. Up he comes to UBC, and he wants to start a new campus ministry. And I asked him the question that everybody would have asked him. It's like, well, what about the existing ministries? And he said, well, they each have something. And so, in other words, the navigators are really strong on discipleship, and Crusade is really strong in evangelism, and University is really strong on fellowship and also sort of the intellectual side. But we embrace all that, and we believe in the power of the Spirit. And well, obviously that got my attention. And down I go to Bellingham to see this in operation. And there it is, with hundreds of university students worshiping, being discipled in small groups, internship program. And I'm just going, This is awesome. But my track ended up being more in downtown ministry and the downtown core west end of Vancouver, which worked perfectly because I had a degree in range and wildlife management, and wildlife is what I found on the streets of the west end of Vancouver. It worked. It was seamless. It was seamless preparation. But it was there, you see, in the downtown that I realized that the intellect can only take you so far, but it cannot transform people. So I'm encountering people that are coming out of lifestyles that are so broken, so damaged, that if God does not show up and heal them, if there is not transformation going on, if the Spirit is not at work, I can tell them about all the Hebrew archaeology that I want. It's not going to make a difference in their life. They don't need just more information. They need to encounter Jesus. And so then I have a conversation with Reed Johnson a year later, and he says, there's no church that's willing to adopt us. And their model, what Reed's model was, is that they would work in conjunction with a local church. So University Christian Ministry would be not a church on campus, but an extension of the churches on campus. It would be a church-like expression on campus, bringing the resources of the church, not parachurch. I coined the term apo church from the Greek, which means out from, like apostle means sent out from. And so this would be the presence of the churches, plural, on campus as an expression, but it would also have that other dimension. And so there was plenty of space for people that didn't share what I began to understand as Pentecostal spirituality, which is not a denominational spirituality. Now, I want to backtrack for a second. Bernice Gerard preceded both of us on campus. And so she was there from the late 60s into the 70s. When I got there in 1979, she was already an alder person in Vancouver. Her chaplaincy work was coming to an end, and it had been dormant for several years. And so, as you know, in the life cycle of a university, that could be like a millennium. So what Reed did was he took on chaplaincy, he took on University Christian Ministries. So when I came in, I embraced both hats. So to the administration and to the chaplaincy association, I was the Pentecostal chaplain. And that's where you did all the officially kind of stuff. But the real action was happening in the student ministry as a club. But at that point, we were operating with two C's. So at that point, it was club and chaplaincy. Now, I'm going to pause there. Obviously, more to the story. I can just keep talking. So I'm going to pause, let you ask questions, redirect. Because
that Rob, that was with the PAOC, right? When you say Pentecostal chaplaincy.
Yeah. So what I did is then I was told that, well, if you take on the chaplaincy, it also involves Simon Fraser University. So we started there. And then a fellow named Kelly McLaughlin came down from the Yukon and wanted to start a chaplaincy at University of Victoria. And so then we saw there was a ministry that started in Kamloops with a pastor named Lance Naylor. And then something began to start at the University of the Okanagan. At that time, it was Okanagan University College. And that was Gerald and Pat Golbeck. and so we were coming, so it was organic, and we came together. And what I worked really, really hard at was getting us on the same page, so we weren't just off doing our different things. Because the one genius thing about the Pentecostals is that it's entrepreneurial. The one weakness is that we're entrepreneurial, and so trying to find common ground for cohesion, values that we all shared in, a shared ethos, and that actually came together in a more formal fashion when we formed BC Campus Ministries in 1992. So that was my experience in British Columbia. So I planted a church in Vancouver, but I was also the director of BC Campus Ministries until I left in 1997. So my roots were in BC. What I was afraid of, quite frankly, was that there would be a decision made somewhere in Mississauga, in Ontario, in the head office. You have to understand, I was a Westerner, right? So Ontario was just, out east. That's out east. And I was afraid somebody out east was going to make a decision that, hey, we're going to start a national campus ministry, and let's call it Chi Alpha. And I cornered national executives to say, don't you dare start something in some office in Mississauga until you see what we're doing out here. Because it needs to grow organically. So another interesting thing, before I finished, Kelly Johnson came and hung out with us when we were at Lake Harrison, in the village of Harrison. We had sort of a campus leaders meeting, and he was going to start a chaplaincy at the University of Calgary, and so the flame kind of jumped over the mountains. And of course, Kelly's a legend, an institution. He's a pillar. But that kind of brings us up to that point. We started from the ground up. We started as individual ministries, expressions of fire in different places. And then my role then was to be a catalyst, to bring these things together and to find that common ground, bring cohesion, develop a philosophy of ministry, interpret campus ministry to the churches who just flat out didn't understand it. They thought it was an extension of high school ministry or something. And my biggest victory was probably convincing the BC district that, no, this is actually mission. This is an extension of your mission. This is home mission. This is mission at your doorstep because of the value of the campus. I'll leave it there, Jordan.
Oh, that's great.
That's good.
That's great. Hey, Rob, maybe, the moment you mentioned it in the mid 90s there, with the BC district, had a little bit more of a story to it. Can you,
yes.
Can you share that with us?
Well, John, that lights my fire. It was tough sledding at a point to try to convince the district to more fully embrace campus ministry, and in other words, if an organization is run by administrators rather than visionaries, you can easily choke out vision. You can just administrate it to death. And so I'm being nuanced here. But that's what was happening. It was just like, yes, I was full of enthusiasm, and yes, this was coming together, and that's really good, Brother Powell. Pat, 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 but yeah, things move slowly around here, and yeah, we'll have to see. And so, in other words, I'm thinking I'm in for the long haul. It may take a decade. It was 1992. It was in Evangel church in Kelowna. There was the district conference, and they had figured out that because I would give a report on the campus, I would come out swinging, and so they limited me to 5 minutes, and so I said my piece within 5 minutes. And are there any questions? And a gentleman came up and said, Kelly McLaughlin at University of Victoria, is he fully funded? I said, no. Why not? Well, that's not the way things work around here. Why don't they? And all of a sudden you got people coming up and that had been impacted by this ministry, and people that and the guy that actually changed everything was a senior pastor. He was in his 60s at that point. It was Jim Van Senior. When I first came to Vancouver, he was my pastor. He had just started a little church in downtown Vancouver, and but you see, I was like one of those intellectual guys. You see, at Regent, I was one of those weird Pentecostal guys. In Jim's church, I was one of those weird guys. But he saw the value of the campus ministry because his grandson had gone through University Christian Ministries, and that would have been under Peter Dove, I believe, at that point. Or Kevin and Patty Hansen. They and so Albert had been transformed, and so he comes out of university on fire, and of course that lights Jim's fire, and so Jim comes up to the microphone, and he's in full form, and he's just going, here we are, and we're funding boats that are going to nowhere and talking to nobody, and here we have a mission field right on our doorstep. And see, what had happened is, a year before, I went to a ministerial and I told them my spiel, about this is a mission field and all that. Well, Jim is singing from my hymn book, except he's doing it in the old style Pentecostal, arm waving, swinging, he's bouncing, and he gets all the old guys just romping, and, they're shouting, and, yeah, we need to do this. And so all of a sudden somebody comes to the floor and he goes, yeah, I make a motion that we put this ministry under home missions. And I just said, well, if you could just pause for a moment. Like, I didn't want to be buried under home missions. I wanted us to be our own thing. In other words, that it would have its own platform. And so David Ball, who went on to national prominence as a administrator, was the administrator in the BC district. He helped me. I didn't realize I had an ally in him, but he helped me craft the vision statement and everything that's in print for the BC district. And so we were then able the next day to move on the floor that the district executive had to move immediately to free up funds to the tune of $50,000 so that it could be distributed to the people that are on the field and at work in the campus ministries, and it would receive top priority. And you realize my head is spinning like what the heck just happened here? But it was a God event, because nobody was going to move the district executive except the floor, except the entire conference, the delegation. And they rose up as with one voice to go, we want this, we want to do it, and you guys are going to do it, and you're going to make it happen. And so I could see our district superintendent at the time just nodding. And then when he actually ended up going to Toronto to do, we obtained a new district superintendent, Bill Gibson, who was all about vision. Like Bill, it was like, and then he brought in John Kaplan, who's all about vision. And it was a new day. Like it was like fresh wind blowing through the BC district. It was wonderful. So, the final several years was basically being able to have the funding necessary to give seed capital to each worker, and then to be able to administrate it and to be able to go on to the campuses to help boost and support and encourage them. So I call it the miracle of '92. It's historic. It just was amazing.
I love that. I love that story, Rob, and I love hearing it every time from you because it just reminds me that God is in the business of doing that today.
Yeah.
And it starts from somewhere. The things that happen historically through prayer. People like yourself who really put it all on the line and just allowed God to work through the body of Christ, whether they're Western gunslingers like yourself and others that are similar, to the administrators that are key for making all of this happen. Right.
It's a creative tension, and I learned that in the national office that that you need that tension. In other words, I needed to be reined in. I needed to report and be accountable, and so it was good. There is no doubt about it. So you're absolutely right. I'm not against administrators. It's just when in other words, if it's all vision, no administration, it'll just blow up. It becomes vapor. It's here today, gone tomorrow. And so you're very correct that way.
Yeah, and there is tension that the push and pull, but at the end of the day, if our hearts remain humble as Jesus' servant leaders, it doesn't have to be a divide. And I'm thankful, right. And I'm thankful for the macro vision that campus ministry has in the POC, and of course we know our general superintendent Dave Wells is all over this. Along with Brian Eggert and others. And so
can I say something about that? Just
absolutely.
The thing is, for some people, the idea of a denomination is limiting. I mean, I had to really struggle. Like, am I going to be defined by a denomination? Well, no, I'm not. But will I work cooperatively with other churches and other people around an agreed set of principles and beliefs? Yes, I will. You can have a denomination of one. Like, you have some of the most antagonistic, anti-denominational people are denominations of one. Whereas what a denomination is it's an expression of a willingness to work together. And so when Dave Wells came in, I believe it was in 2008, I think he wrote a little book. It was something like What I See, or The View from Here, or whatever it was. It was just a small little book. And he talked about us being a mission, a missional family, built in relationships. And I thought, yes, that's yes. And the picture he painted was one that I thought, I can work within this. This is my language. This works. So what he did is that he created a huge fabric that eccentrics like me could paint on. And I know that I'm safe within the borders. I knew that there would be limitations, and change happens slowly and all of that. But I knew that there was stability. I knew that there was wisdom. I always respected, as I worked within the national office, I respected every one of the officers, everyone over me, everyone that I worked with. I'm saying that from the heart. I'm semi-retired. I got nothing to gain from this except to say, they gave stability and structure to my dreams, and they allowed space for my gifting, which in other words, they just go, okay, we get you now. We get what you're good at, what you're not. We'll fill in where you're not, and we'll hold you to account. And you get those receipts in, and it just, in other words, you do your book work, but then they let me go onto campuses and break fresh ground. And when I dreamed of and here's part of the thing is, when I was working at the national level, I'm encountering works of genius really everywhere. In Manitoba with Tammy Youngins, or it was in Back-Lombic up in the University of Alberta, and Kelly Johnson, and the whole BC clan. That when you came, John, you were a builder, and that's why I don't think there could possibly be a better person following me right now, because some of it is that you'll be cleaning up my messes, and in other parts, you're building on what can be built on, and I'm just confident that, okay, this is the man to build it into the 21st century, because you're an empowering leader. But what my role was primarily a catalyst again, a networker. Catalyst meaning bringing together the right people and the right things to bring about the right result. And so I would hang out with people that were totally cool, and this would be right from Newfoundland to in the Maritimes, and then walking the streets of Quebec, and you were in the meetings, where we wander into McGill and go, like, it's a wasteland in here, in downtown Montreal, 250,000 students, and what's going on? That weighs down. So I thought, I have so many enriching conversations with so many people, and so my dream was, and it happened in 2015. If I can just get everybody together, all these cool people that I have these amazing conversations with, and they have different models. And that's where I came up with the C5, because I just inventoried, like, what are you doing? And what's good about what you're doing? And what could you do? And And so I realized that for example, McMaster, Lift Church, starting a campus church. Well, I'm a BC guy, No, that's not what you do. You don't start a campus church, but no, that's what they did. They started a campus church, and that's what the embassy did up in University of Waterloo, campus church. And I'm thinking, no, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. But I created space. Okay, then we have a campus church, and then we had. I lose track of the. It was
Church-based.
So we have. Pardon me? Yeah, there's church-based. Absolutely, church-based ministry, and that could be Red Frogs. That could be something where a church intentionally reaches out to the university. And it's not just sending a bus to pick them up. That doesn't count. I mean, the church has to be present on a campus to make a difference. And so I had stuff printed up. Printing's expensive, a couple $100 of my budget into C4. And then I get a note from Windsor, University of Windsor, like, hey guys, look at this. I've got a cool cafe on the edge of campus and to reach students. And I'm going, dang, like where does that fit into C4? It doesn't. So I added another C, creative ventures, which covers everything else, right? Like I needed something that, so there wouldn't have to be a C6, Okay, whatever else creative you do, we got you covered. But I love that. The idea then that we could be multifaceted, multi-pronged, so that the University of Alberta, Matt Glombeck was running a campus church, which was also a club, and he's a chaplain. And, he had at least 3 of those babies covered. And whereas at University of Calgary, Kelly Johnson was pure chaplaincy, but chaplaincy on steroids. Like he does it so well that like he's the mayor of the place. And I would walk through with him. It's basically like all doors are open to him. Anybody in the administration, you can walk into vice president's office and administrators, and it's like he owns the place. And I just go, well, this is totally cool. Like, so if people want to learn about chaplaincy, spend time with Kelly. You want to learn about campus clubs? Well, go to UCM and hang out with Seth, or who was a chaplain, a full-on chaplain at SFU, and also ran UCM, which is a club. So we do things in multiple layers, and all of this cross-fertilization was going on, but it's in my head. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could bring people together in real time and they could experience this for themselves? And this is just me personally, but I could have died and gone to heaven at the end of that. It was just like, it was so awesome. It exceeded my dreams. It was just spirit-filled, spirit-washed. People talk, and the only thing was 2017 was even better. And, it was just because we're really grinding into issues. And then you were able to basically take that and then build from that and think, okay, we do need some outside input now. Who should we get it from? And the fact that we're struggling with, COVID, quite frankly. So that this is a whole new world going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's great to have Jordan here on the podcast too, because, I can tell he's just bursting because he launched Red Frogs on a campus that was not really too open.
No.
To Christians, Christian
No.
groups, and just started serving. And that's kind of where that creative venture, came out. In fact, Jordan, you were the first podcast we did, and now you're like a church, like you're a full-on campus church and a registered charity, and have great relationship with the district, collaborating together. And
we just got approved to be funded for 5 years from our district. So just so you know, Rob. So yeah, it's pretty.
That's a high five, by the way. A high five. That's, I mean, that
fist bump.
Oh my goodness, man.
But we and I just and it's, but what's been really cool is that just hearing you talk, it's interesting to hear where things start, right? It's interesting to hear because for me, as someone who, it was not just because of COVID. Like, I think everything the last couple of years for me has been intentional, either intentionally from God or God was taking out the hedge snippers and he was pruning me and he was using all these circumstances, whether it was my dad passing away or whether it was, okay, we launched this thing and now we can't do Red Frogs because of COVID. And what do we do? I think it's interesting to hear. Like it sounds like you were kind of in a bit of a tunnel as well as a leader in the early on stages, and just hearing that story of like year 92. I think I was 3 years old at the time, but it's cool to hear the breakthrough of that story, right? Because for me, like it's just interesting to hear that and that people have gone before you in those moments where you don't even know what's going to be happening tomorrow, right? Like you have no idea. Totally. And then God just like does something and pushes it forward. So what I also found really cool and interesting is I wanted to highlight, I don't know if you can elaborate on this, but you mentioned making the 5 C's, right? Yeah. Which is the current serve model, the different types of models you can launch. And what I found really cool was that you didn't really, maybe you were defensive at the time when you saw people doing different things and you're like, wait a second. But then instead of like being super competitive and like you incorporate, like you said, okay, we need to make another C, right? So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that more or how that, I just found that was really cool. Yeah.
So I don't even get credit for the first 3 because so much hard work was done by George Werner, who was the head of Mission Canada. He launched it, and he brought together the campus tribe. And so John was in on that conversation where the embassy at the University of Waterloo is probably the largest campus ministry that Canada's ever had. Like in its heyday, it was running between 800 and 900 kids in the largest amphitheater in the university. I mean, it was bursting. And then stuff happened that I think personally was diabolical. But all I'm saying is that like that was the thing, and Brandon Malo was like the it guy, and that's as far as the Western Ontario district was concerned. That's what you got to do. You got to plant a church on a campus. And meanwhile, I'm going, no, you guys, no. But then, Kelly is doing chaplaincy. And I hadn't really zoned in on what he was doing. I lost contact with him, you see, because I'm planting a church out in Burlington. And it wasn't until, and then the other thing, of course, John, is the club-based model. So you get 3 really strong players together around the table, and they're going, we can make this work, and so to me, I'm just going, they all start with the letter C. We'll go with the C3 model. And then I added a C4 model. And But I recognized quickly that somebody like Matt Glombeck was running multiple. Like he was a chaplain, he was a campus pastor. It was a club, um, So I thought, okay, they don't need to compete. They operate in different niches. That each of them can touch a part of the campus that the other part cannot.
Yes.
For example, and so that became pretty obvious to me pretty quickly. So it wasn't as much defensive as it was that I was stuck in the success of a model that I saw work really, really well. And I hadn't yet had the opportunity to see the other models. And so here's some really interesting things. Like my son David, before he died, was involved heavily in Lift Church and in the embassy at the University of Waterloo. And both of them thought that, well, he's our guy. In other words, he was so active. And another thing is that my son Jordan, I have a son named Jordan, born in 1990. He ended up going to University of British Columbia, getting actively involved in University Christian Ministries. He linked up with John, and that became a formative part of his discipleship 30 years later, or 20, plus years later, 90. Yeah, so it's just that you never know.
Yeah.
You just like God has a
and that's
future.
how God works. He plants that seed, and you don't even and he does that on purpose so that it's not about us, it's about him, right? And that's what I found. Yeah, even what you pointed out about the different parts of the different seeds reaching different parts of campus, I think it's important to have a flexible model, because sometimes you don't even know how your campus is going to react, right? You don't even know. Like for us, we are going to, once COVID restrictions are done, which is very soon, it's like Sunday for us here. Once the vaccine mandate's done, we're going to book a spot in March to hold our church that meets on Sunday nights, and we'll be able to book a free spot because we have a club, right? So it allows us to move and be flexible to have two C's, or to have two different models kind of working together, which is what you just described, which I think is really cool. I think that's really neat. So
now I have a cool story about the University of Regina, for what it's worth. Is like when I travel, if I can, I don't want to be accountable. I don't want to just stay in a motel. So I stayed with the pastor of your church. I think back. He had a motorcycle accident.
Yeah, so Doug Lancaster, who was the pastor at Avonhurst, which is where I was working, and now they planted me on the campus here. So
okay.
So Avonhurst Pentecostal Assembly is the church.
Yeah. So I'm staying with him, and his wife works at the University of Regina, or worked. She's passed away. And was her name Audrey? I
actually don't know.
My mind's skipping, but she was a blast. So we're going to do a prayer tour of the University of Regina. It's after hours. It's like 10 p.m. and we march in and we're walking around, and Doug's going, I don't think we should be here. And she's going, why not? And so we're marching right through everything, the pub, the floors. And I realized really quickly what I do is discern the spirituality of a place. It's like there's a spiritual dimension to what I did, and so I'm really praying. And then I made it a mission. I had to come back to the University of Regina again. And I just spent a day praying. And I went, walked walk the halls and all of that. Actually, and then here's what happened. My brain is such it ejects nouns and names like it's. But the district superintendent previously, big fellow,
John Gisner.
Yeah, John comes down because he's going to meet directly pastors from all over, and we have a prayer time there as well. And it was hanging on me, like something has got to happen. Can you people not see the opportunity that you have here in this campus? Something has to happen, So I and by the way, Regina is where I was born, and I lived there for the first 5 years of my life.
Yeah.
And so when you came on, it was just like to me, it was like Miracle City again. It was just like that's the kind of stuff that happens, and then it's just like God's going, "Oh, yeah, man, I got this. I got the guy. He doesn't know it yet." And like he's just pastoring in a church, but yeah, never mind. And then when you show up, Shazam, get 5 years of funding for ministry at the University of Regina. I mean, they could not possibly spend mission money better than that. That's just that pumps me up.
So now that we're talking a bit more about the current, not that I want this to be about us, this podcast, us today, because you kind of unraveled the history in a large part of your story of just your journey.
Yeah.
And so what's one specific thing that you learned throughout your journey? Even if you want to turn it into advice for current workers, but like, what's one thing you'd pull out of your journey that you want to share advice on?
Okay. Two things. Okay. You said one, but I'm going to make it two.
Yeah.
And
they're
they're both interrelated. The thing is, we subscribe to evangelical orthodoxy. And the thing is, I'm going to have to restrain myself because I was going to add a third, but no, just back. So assuming that we have doctrine straight, and we understand that apologetics has to reach the whole person, not just their mind, but it involves the use of story, the use of it's connecting with their whole being, being curious about them. That for me was really helpful. It's just the spirit of curiosity. Going into a situation, assuming I know nothing, and observing everything, looking at the bulletin boards,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing who's doing what, who's saying what. What is the para-curricular curriculum that's going on in this university? And who should I, as a servant, coming alongside of administrators, just to say, hey, how can I help you? I care about students. You care about students. Is there anything I could do specifically? Is there anything I could pray for? Is there any, however you want to work it, but people will know if you're legitimately concerned and legitimately care. And that care comes from prayer. When you have God's heart for a university is made up of people. So it's an institution, and, it can be really daunting and all that, but it's people, and increasingly broken people. And if you care, and that's where the term serve kind of arose out of that ethos. How can we serve you? But learning that comes out of curiosity. And there's a difference, like coming, like, you know, the great white missionary, I'm here to serve you, but on my terms and in my way,
Yes.
because I know what's going on and you don't. Or I don't know what's going on. I don't know who you are. I don't know what struggles you have. I don't know what you're seeing. You know, tell me. So curiosity and learning to ask questions is huge. Just it's, you know, so the Socratic method, basically. But it's a sincere one, you know, not to try to trip them up apologetically. The other is what I stressed at the beginning is that everything we do has to promote an encounter. And I'm not saying an experience, because God encounters us. That's the living God. The living God is not asleep somewhere. See, the God I grew up with in the United Church of Canada, I'm sorry to mention denominations, but he was asleep. He may have been dead. I didn't know. You know, he was kind of like the backdrop to explain why we should do all these good deeds, and it's good to be good and bad to be bad, and why, well, you know, because God, who's asleep and dead and doesn't do miracles, said so. And you need to just use your common sense. That was kind of what I got out of 17 years of that, you know. And whereas this is the living God who is present, and when Jesus, that's the encounter with Jesus, and that's what we're about as Pentecostals. I believe that's the genius at the core of what we do, is that we want people to encounter the living God. And so I'm always thinking about that when I'm using apologetics. I don't necessarily win the person over. If I'm talking theology, I don't necessarily win the person over. You know, this relationship, I don't necessarily, but leading somebody into an encounter where, can I pray for you? And the number of times where that has made all the difference. I've had people in retrospect come back and go, yeah, you know, I came into your office or wherever it was, and what you said was like really interesting. And then you prayed for me. Or, you know, the apologetics thing you did during the noon hour, yeah, it was really interesting. But when the Thursday night meetings, when we got together and the Spirit moved, like, that changed my life. And so what I'm pleading is, don't sell that out. Don't flatten it up. We're Trinitarian, you know. It's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit dynamically brings the fullness of God on the scene. And if we sell that short, we are failing to give the campus what we should be bringing the campus, if I can put it that way. And then just the final little thing related to that is, I had one fellow from Dalhousie University who's a student. He came up and he said, you know, is my generation worse than yours? And I thought, are you crazy? Like, we were wrecks, you know. Like, no. I said, but the one thing is, just one thing, is that you have more noise and more hurry, and you encounter God in quiet. And when you create space, which means time, to slow down, unplug, and so that it's not from the outside in, you're not just listening, but you're still. And in the stillness, God moves the way that he moves. I'm not telling you how he speaks, I'm not going to define an experience. So, like, it's not about experience, it's about encounter. And people encounter him in different ways. And, but he encounters. That I can promise, he encounters. I can't promise you what experience it's going to be. But this I do know, that he begins to shape my thoughts. He begins to give me an inclination in a certain direction. He will weigh something on my heart. He will give me a love for people I don't love. And, it's, in other words, if I pray for campus, I ask for his heart and I wait. And I realize that the love that I have doesn't come from me because I can't manufacture it. Like, this is not about soul power. It's we just don't have enough. We cannot manufacture this. So we become conduits. And that's how, if I could encourage anybody to do anything, is just slow down, find the half hour, block it out, fight for it, unplug, listen, wait. It's not just about, and you can be guided by reading some scripture and then just waiting, however you do it, but do it.
That's great words, and an appropriate way to end, because really what we're talking about here is this all began in prayer and waiting and allowing ourselves the space to listen, hear, be humble. And now, we see how we all kind of work together. There's even a thread here between the three of us on this podcast in some way.
Wild, eh?
Yeah. And it's beautiful how the Lord works. And so, Rob, I just want to say thank you again so much. It's been a pleasure and honor to have you unpack history with us and how it relates to the present as well. Where's the best place that our listeners could connect with you? With the email, or what's the best way?
Probably, sure. I mean, Facebook Messenger. I'm easy to find. I have 2 B's in my name.
Yeah.
And that's, people will be able to figure it out. We'll probably have friends in common. And so you can use Messenger, befriend me or whatever. And otherwise, my email is sonwalker, SONWALKER 77 @gmail.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll be sure to put those in the show notes, Rob. And again, just thank you, so much. And it's great. It's great to have everyone with us today. And I hope our time really has helped your thinking about how to practically serve students on your campus all across Canada.